Welcome to the show. Today, we're digging into something that affects pretty much all of us, our online security and, well, our privacy in this digital age.
That's right. We're drawing from a really interesting discussion that happened at SXSW. It featured Meredith Whitaker, who's the president of Signal, the messaging app.
Right, Signal. And she was in conversation with Guy Kawasaki.
Exactly. And they tackled this big question. Has the way we live changed so much now that actually everyone has something they need to keep private online?
It's a fascinating question because you hear that a lot. I've got nothing to hide. But is that really true anymore?
Well, that's what we want to explore today. We'll look at the current landscape of online security, the kinds of risks we might be taking with different apps we use every day.
And really make the case for why thinking about privacy, why choosing privacy-focused tools is becoming crucial, not just for certain people, but, well, for everybody.
So let's start with that very idea, the nothing to hide argument. Whitaker had a great way of looking at this, didn't she?
She did. It's really simple but effective. She just asked, essentially, don't we all close the bathroom door?
Yeah. It's such a basic human thing. It cuts across cultures, doesn't it? You need that private space.
And she built on that. She pointed out how we naturally talk differently to different people.
Right. You don't talk to your boss the same way you talk to your best friend or your doctor or someone you just met.
Exactly. We manage these layers of intimacy, you could say. What we share, when we share it, it's fundamental to relationships.
So that need for privacy, for controlling who knows what about us, that hasn't changed. That's inherently human.
Okay, so if a need hasn't changed, what has changed so dramatically?
It's the environment around us. Whitaker really emphasized this. The world is just. It's way more volatile now, and the level of surveillance has exploded.
Surveillance by who, exactly?
Primarily by a very small number of huge organizations, tech companies mostly. They hold these enormous, incredibly detailed data sets about us, our habits, what we like, who we talk to, everything.
And that concentration of data, that's the problem.
It creates a huge power imbalance. As Whitaker put it, privacy isn't some sterile, abstract concept. It's actually what guarantees really fundamental things.
Like what?
Like democracy, like freedom of thought, freedom of expression. If you know everything you search for, everything you say privately could be recorded and potentially used against you.
You start self-censoring. It has a chilling effect.
Precisely. So the need for privacy is constant, but the threats to it, fueled by this mass data collection, they've just scaled up massively.
It's easy, though, isn't it, to think, well, my data isn't that interesting. It's just cat videos and shopping. Whitaker had a way to push back on that, too.
She did a really powerful thought experiment. She asked people to imagine, what if every single message you've ever sent, texts, DMs, emails, suddenly became public tomorrow?
Oof.
And not just public, but searchable. Imagine an AI bot analyzing all of it. Everything you said to your boss, your friends, your partner, your doctor, maybe sensitive health discussions, political views you only shared privately.
Yeah, that's a genuinely terrifying thought when you put it like that.
And her point was, this isn't some far-fetched sci-fi scenario. The content might be mostly private on some platforms, but the companies like Meta, like Google, they have vast amounts of this kind of interaction data already.
They know who you talk to, when, maybe where you were.
Exactly. Think about just the last year of your digital life. All those connections, all those interactions. It's a huge amount of information.
And, okay, maybe the first thing they do with it is show you an ad for something you just talked about. Seems harmless enough, maybe just annoying.
Right. That's the sort of surface-level use. But Whitaker warned this centralized data hoard, this surveillance power, it can be used for much more than just ads. It can be used to influence opinions, shape behavior.
Worst-case scenarios actually cause direct harm to people.
Absolutely. Her argument was basically, we need to consciously build a digital world that prioritizes privacy by design, like Signal aims to do, rather than accepting this default model of mass surveillance. What kind of future do we actually want?
That really sets the stage. So let's talk about the real-world harm. It can be hard to see sometimes, right? Because this data is usually hidden away.
It is. Whitaker mentioned that tracing direct harm is difficult because the data itself is proprietary, it's kept secret, but she gave a really stark recent example.
Which one was that?
The case of a woman in Nebraska. After the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, her private Facebook messages were actually used by prosecutors in a case against her related to abortion.
Wow. So private DMs used as evidence in a criminal trial.
Exactly. Can you imagine the chilling effect of that? Knowing your supposedly private chats could be turned against you in such a life-altering way, it shows that private on some platforms isn't truly private from legal demands or potentially even hackers.
That definitely hits home. It's not abstract anymore at that point.
And it goes beyond individual cases. She also brought up a major cybersecurity incident, the Salt Typhoon hack. This was reportedly Chinese nation-state hackers.
What happened there?
This was late 2024. They apparently got access to millions of U.S. accounts, and not just emails or passwords. We're talking names, phone numbers, SMS, text messages, call logs, even location data.
That's incredibly sensitive.
Mm.
What could someone do with that kind of information on millions of people?
Think about it from an intelligence perspective, which Whitaker highlighted. You could identify potential assets, figure out who is meeting with whom, track movements, access potentially sensitive government or corporate communications that happened over regular SMS or calls.
The potential for espionage, manipulation, blackmail, it's huge.
It really is. And what was the remediation advice given out by the FBI and others after this?
Let me guess. Use Signal.
You got it. Consistent use of end-to-end encrypted messaging like Signal. And this advice wasn't just for spies or diplomats, it was for ordinary people whose data was caught up in this breach. It was about protecting everyone's basic privacy.
What's really alarming about Salt Typhoon, though, is how they apparently got in.
Yes, this is crucial. According to reports Whitaker cited, the attackers exploited interception capabilities, basically, backdoors that telecom companies had built into their system.
Backdoors. You mean ways for law enforcement to get access?
Supposedly. That's often the justification. But Whitaker made a critical point. You can't build a vulnerability, a way to break encryption or bypass security that only the good guys can use.
If there's a key, eventually someone else might find it or steal it.
Exactly. Breaking encryption for anyone means you're potentially breaking it for everyone. And in the Salt Typhoon case, this wasn't theoretical. It seems these backdoors, intended perhaps for surveillance, were weaponized by foreign adversaries, leading to a massive breach.
It really drives home the importance of strong, unbroken encryption. But okay, lots of apps say they have encryption now. WhatsApp, iMessage, are they all the same? How does Signal differ?
That's a really important distinction Whitaker clarified. She used the sort of layer cake analogy, which I think is helpful.
Okay, layer cake.
Yeah. So WhatsApp, for example, actually licenses Signal's core encryption protocol. That technology is considered the gold standard for securing the content of messages. So that's one layer. The actual words you type are encrypted end to end.
So the what you say part is protected. That sounds good.
It is good, but it's only one layer of the cake. The issue is all the other data WhatsApp, which is owned by Meta, still collects. This is the metadata.
Metadata. Meaning what?
This is the data about your communication. So who you're messaging, how often, when, who's in your group chats, potentially your location when you use the app, your profile picture, your status updates, your phone's contact list. It's a lot.
Ah, okay. So even if they can't read the message, they know who sent it, who received it, when, maybe where.
Precisely. And Whitaker pointed out how revealing metadata can be. She even quoted a former intelligence chief who bluntly said, "We kill people based on metadata."
Wow. That's stark.
It shows that just knowing the patterns of communication, the connections between people, can be incredibly powerful information, even without the message content itself.
So how is Signal different with metadata?
Signal's entire philosophy, its architecture, is designed from the ground up to collect as close to zero data as technically possible. Not just encrypting the content, but actively trying not to know who you're talking to or when. They've re-engineered things to minimize that metadata footprint.
That sounds fundamentally different. What about, say, Telegram? That's popular too.
Whitaker was pretty clear on Telegram. She described it more like a social media platform. Encryption isn't the default for most chats, only for specific secret chats. And generally, it collects a lot of user data. It's not really in the same category as Signal when you're talking about privacy focus.
Okay. And Apple's iMessage. Blue bubbles, green bubbles.
Right. iMessage is interesting. Apple uses its own encryption, which Whitaker acknowledged has some similarities in principle to Signal's. But there are key differences.
Like what?
Well, first, Apple controls the whole system. It's their proprietary technology. And crucially, unlike Signal, iMessage's code isn't open source.
Meaning independent experts can't just go and check how secure it really is.
Exactly. With Signal, the entire codebase is public. Security researchers, hackers, academics all over the world can and do scrutinize it constantly. Whitaker emphasized this is vital for trust. You don't just have to take Signal's word for it, the community verifies it.
That transparency makes a big difference.
It does. Plus, she raised another point about iMessage. If you use iCloud to back up your iPhone.
Which, let's be honest, most people probably do for convenience.
Right. If those backups aren't separately encrypted with a key-only you control, which often they aren't by default, then potentially Apple or someone who compromises Apple servers or gets a warrant could access your iMessage history through those backups. That kind of undermines the end-to-end encryption promise.
Okay. So Signal's approach seems much more thorough, covering both content and minimizing metadata, plus the open source verification.
That's the core idea. And Whitaker stressed that they work hard to make this high level of privacy easy to use. People don't switch to Signal because they're cryptography experts.
No, they switch to talk to their friends, their family.
Exactly. So the privacy needs to be built in, seamless, not some complicated thing you have to configure. Their goal is usability for everyone, while still offering that top-tier protection needed by people in really high-risk situations, like journalists or activists. It's about democratizing strong privacy.
Which brings us to a really practical question. How does Signal actually survive? If they're not collecting data to sell ads, how do they pay the bills? It's not free to run servers and develop software.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Signal operates as a nonprofit. They're funded primarily by user donations and grants.
A nonprofit in the tech world, that seems unusual for a messaging app.
It is unusual, and Whitaker acknowledged it's challenging. Running a global, real-time communication system as a nonprofit is complex, but it's a very deliberate choice.
Why? What's the advantage?
It fundamentally aligns their incentives with user privacy. Think about it. The entire business model of most big tech platforms relies on surveillance. Collecting your data, building profiles, targeting ads, that's the engine.
So if Signal were a for-profit company?
Even if they started with good intentions, there would likely be immense pressure from investors down the line. Pressure to grow revenue, find ways to monetize a user base, which almost inevitably leads back to using user data in some way, potentially compromising privacy promises.
Right, the profit motive could conflict with the privacy mission.
Exactly. By being a nonprofit, Signal can insulate itself from that pressure. Their mission is privacy, full stop. Now, they are exploring ways to make it sustainable long-term.
Like what? Charging for the app?
They've talked about things like optional paid features, maybe cosmetic things like sticker packs or encouraging more donations. Whitaker explicitly said they don't want to put the core service behind a paywall because that creates barriers and hurts the network effect. You want everyone to be able to use it easily.
So it's more like Wikipedia, a vital public resource that relies on community support.
That's a great analogy she used. Signal needs to survive and thrive, like Wikipedia does. She pointed out this weird paradox in tech valuation. Privacy-focused tech, like Signal, is often seen as less valuable financially than surveillance-based startups, even though its social value is immense.
It's kind of a broken economic model in that sense.
You could definitely argue that. For now, she said their focus is safeguarding Signal, this jewel, because it's so critical for so many vulnerable groups globally: journalists, activists, human rights defenders, people living under repressive regimes.
And they're serious about protecting it, like resisting government demands.
Absolutely. She was unequivocal. They routinely push back against government requests for data they simply don't have. They've been very clear they will not build backdoors, ever. And she also stated firmly, Signal is not for sale. If it were ever acquired, the structure requires funds to go back into mission-aligned causes.
Okay, that's a strong commitment. Now, the conversation also touched on something that's everywhere right now: artificial intelligence, AI. How does that factor into this privacy discussion?
Yeah, this was a really important part of the discussion. Whitaker gave some historical context. The current AI boom, the deep learning revolution that really kicked off around TLE 12.
With things like image recognition getting suddenly much better.
Exactly, like the AlexNet paper. What fueled that breakthrough wasn't just clever algorithms, it was the sudden availability of two key ingredients: massive data sets and powerful computing power, GPUs.
And who had access to massive data sets and computing power back then?
The big players in the surveillance advertising industry, Google, Facebook, etc., they realized AI was incredibly powerful for analyzing user behavior, predicting clicks, targeting ads more effectively, keeping users engaged longer.
So AI development became deeply intertwined with the business model of collecting user data.
Precisely. It created this massive ongoing hunger for more data. The more data you feed the AI models, the supposedly smarter they get. This is why we see things now like Reddit changing its API access to charge AI companies or companies scraping data from all over the web.
They need fuel for the AI fire.
That's a good way to put it. And this need for data, plus the incredible amount of computing power required for training these large models, is concentrating AI power in the hands of those same few large platform companies. It reinforces the centralization and surveillance issues we already have.
Okay, so that's the foundation. But what are the new risks AI introduces, specifically regarding privacy?
Whitaker raised serious concerns about the push towards what she called agentic AI integrated directly into our devices. Think of an AI assistant that doesn't just answer questions, but actively manages your life.
Like booking appointments, managing emails, controlling smart home devices. Sounds convenient, maybe?
On the surface, maybe. But think about what that AI agent needs access to in order to function. Your browser history, your emails, your calendar, your contacts, your location, maybe even your financial information, your private messages.
Pretty much everything.
Everything. And likely a lot of this processing won't happen purely on your device. It'll involve sending data back to the cloud. This creates huge new potential points of failure for security and privacy.
How so?
Whitaker warned it could effectively break down the separation we currently have between different applications and the operating system. If an AI agent has deep hooks into everything, it might bypass the privacy protections individual apps, even encrypted ones like Signal, try to provide. It's like giving one master key access to every room in your house.
So the promise of convenience could come at the cost of completely eroding our digital privacy barriers.
That's the major concern she flagged. Are we rushing into integrating this powerful AI into the fabric of our digital lives without fully understanding or even discussing the potential privacy meltdown it could cause? It feels like privacy guarantees could be undermined very quickly in the name of seamless AI features.
It often feels like we're told, though, well, if you want AI progress, you need data. No data, no AI. How did Whitaker respond to that? Is it really a choice between privacy and innovation?
She really pushed back on that framing. She challenged the idea that progress or innovation must mean whatever the big tech companies are currently selling, especially when it's built on surveillance.
So it's not that she's anti-technology.
Not at all. She presented Signal itself as Exhibit A. Here's a piece of technology that works incredibly well, provides a vital service, and is built on a fundamentally different foundation, one that prioritizes privacy from the start.
So building privacy-preserving tech is innovation.
Absolutely. She argued that choosing not to collect data isn't anti-innovation. In fact, figuring out how to provide services without vacuuming up user data, how to build truly secure systems that protect users from breaches and misuse, that is a crucial form of innovation, especially now.
It's just maybe not the kind of innovation that gets billion-dollar valuations based on ad revenue potential.
Precisely. She also had a bit of a critique for the way AI is being shoehorned into products sometimes, almost without a clear user need.
Like the return of Clippy, but maybe more talkative.
Huh. Yeah, she made a comparison like that Clippy, but verbose. The idea that AI is being added everywhere just because it's the hot new thing, not necessarily because it solves a real user problem better than existing methods, and potentially creating new privacy risks in the process.
So Signal's approach to AI is likely to be cautious.
Very much so, based on her comments. She emphasized Signal will focus on features users actually want and need. They won't compromise user privacy just to collect data to train some AI model. Their commitment, she reiterated, is to protect user data, prevent it from being exfiltrated or vulnerable. That is their core innovation focus.
This has been incredibly illuminating. It really brings together the technical aspects, the business models, and the human need for privacy. As we wrap up, what's the main thing you think people should take away from this?
I think the absolute core message is that taking your online security and privacy seriously isn't optional anymore. It's not just for techies or people with secrets. In the world we live in now, it's a fundamental responsibility for everyone.
Because the risks are real and the stakes are high.
Exactly. We've seen how that basic human need for private spaces is being challenged by massive data collection. We've seen the potential for real harm, and how even apps that promise encryption might have significant gaps, especially around metadata.
And Signal really stands out in its approach, minimizing data collection, being nonprofit, being open source.
Right. It offers a tangible alternative, which leads to the call to action, I suppose.
Which is pretty straightforward.
I think so. If you're concerned about this, if you want to take a concrete step towards better online security, towards having more control over your own information download Signal, start using it. Encourage your friends and family to use it. It's a practical, easy step you can take right now.
It puts some power back in the user's hands.
It does. It's a way to choose privacy in a landscape that often defaults to surveillance.
Okay, and one final thought to leave everyone chewing on.
Maybe just this. Step back and think about the kind of digital future we are actually building with the choices we make every day. The technology we use, the services we sign up for, they all shape that future. So beyond messaging apps, what other convenient technologies might be quietly chipping away at our privacy? What are the hidden costs we aren't seeing yet? It's worth asking those questions.